Hey guys, so for today's video, I really want to talk about something that's a little broad, something that a lot of directors, a lot of film fanatics like me probably have talked about at some point. And this is kind of a thing that's always changing. It's always updating itself over time, and that's the current state of film. And so for this video, I really want to take kind of my own perception of that, and I kind of I want to talk about how I feel where we currently are with film. Where I think it might be going, where we currently, like I said, where we currently are. And what we can kind of do with it and what it kind of represents at this point in time, I think. So for my first point, this is also something that I'll get to a second here. Something that Martin Scorsese kind of went into depth about around the time Wolf of Wall Street came out recently. That films have more rental equipment, so like there's more places where you can rent things to make films with. They're cheaper to make now. Films are specifically. They're easier to show around to people. Like we have internet now. We have online, YouTube, Vimeo.com, all these things that weren't even available, I'd say, even in like the early 90s and the 80s and things like that. Like that technology back then for promoting your films and showing what you could do as a filmmaker were not around at that time. But yeah, there are tons of places now where you can rent equipment out, rent tripods out, rent cameras out, rent lighting equipment out. So it's cheaper and it's a little bit more mainstream now to be able to make movies. Because, like I said, back in the day, you'd either have to be a film school student, actually be in the film industry, or you would have to buy some of this equipment yourself in order to make movies. And it's a little bit cheaper now. It's still not cheap like like Dollar General kind of cheap, but it's not like impossibly hard to buy like it once was. Like I'm sure back in the day, things like Final Cut Pro and things like Premiere, like editing software for film, I'm sure was a very expensive form of software to buy. And not a lot of people, I'm sure, owned these things at home at that time either. I'm sure they had to actually go out to a studio to be able to work with these forms of software. And now we have a lot of the software at our homes now, like Premiere and like Final Cut Pro and things of that nature. I think with today's visual effects, and like I said, with that previous point, Martin Scorsese kind of brought that up. Kind of how film's always changing, and we can now post stuff online and show it that way. And, they're cheaper to make, and it's easier to rent things out now. But then my next point that I want to bring up personally is with today's visual effects, everything and anything could get made, but sometimes the budget can restrict this. We have some of the best visual effects we'll probably have seen in a long time now, and I'm sure it'll only get better at this point with all the technology that gets updated over time for use for movies. And like I said, everything and anything could get made. Look at Avatar, for example. They made worlds, they made characters out of certain CGI and things of that nature, things that just didn't exist 20 or 30 years ago. And like I said, budget can restrict this. There's been times, and there still is to this day, where certain films don't get made simply because they're just too expensive to make. I mean, um, with CGI and things of that nature, getting the right actors and actresses to be on the set for the film and be able to make things look and sound and feel and do the things that you want it to do. If it's a really abstract and really technical film, some of that stuff, it has to be a huge budget in order for it to get made. Simply because a lot of this stuff is very expensive, and over time it just kind of adds up. You got to pay the actors and actresses and the people who work in the crew and things of that nature. But for the most part, budget wise aside, I think with today's visual effects we can make almost anything. I mean, look at like I said, Avatar, and look at like the Avengers, and yeah, like look at the Avengers. I mean, in the '60s and '70s, that kind of stuff didn't exist. I mean, they had a Spider-Man made for TV film back then, but like they had to use strings, and like the strings were pretty visible back then, and it's just really amazing just how far we've gone since film started back in the day, and just really amazing, I think. Independent films are getting more attention. It's not just about film festivals anymore, and it very much is. I mean, look at like Her, for example. Like for when I that the trailer for that film first came out, like I said, this is the Spike Jonze most recent film, Her. Um, at first I thought, okay, people like me are probably gonna go see it because I'm a huge Spike Jonze fan, and I really like to see like independent films that make sure that every dollar count for the production. And to my surprise, a lot of people who don't normally go to indie films or independent films had interest in seeing it, and I think it helped that it actually eventually did have a wide release. And I think a lot of directors now and producers are starting to realize that even though wide releases are more expensive than limited releases, the advantage of a wide release is that gives people who don't normally watch indie films a chance to see the film. And because like I said, people really enjoy good concepts in films, good writing in films, and because independent films really rely on every single dollar that's given to them to make the film work, since they don't have the money they can take advantage of like a big budget film can. They really have to make sure that that concept and storyline and things that are going for are really working well in it. And I think a lot of people really admire that trait to a film when they sit down and watch it. So independent films are getting much, much bigger than they once were. Because, like I said, independent films once were just like a film festival thing. You would show it there. Maybe a producer or director liked it. They would get you into a studio somewhere, and that's how you would make the bigger budget stuff that would actually get wide releases that people would actually go and see at a theater. I think it's amazing how we once went from tapes to discs to high definition and now to streaming. Like we're getting to the point now where we don't even need a physical copy of something just to see a film. We can stream it online, it's saved somewhere in a database. Click a button, it starts up. Obviously the buffering is the biggest disadvantage to streaming a film now. Because it has to upload and things of that nature. It has to make sure it's still working and things like that. Um, but there's some very good streaming sources out there as far as streaming goes. So I just really think it's amazing how we went from like I said, like these big brick-like tapes that we had to carry around with us to go see the film with, or then we went to a disc. It's cheaper. It's cheaper for the studio to make too, and it was a little bit easier to find storage for it. Then we got to high definition, where it was still a disc, and it was much better picture quality and sound, almost to the point where it was better than what we got in the movie theater as far as sound and audio and picture quality goes for with the right TV and everything. And like I said, now we're just streaming. Now we're to the point where we don't even need a physical copy of something. Just save the file somewhere that's reliable and safe, and have a way for people to go to that site or that streaming source to be able to watch the film for themselves. Like I said, Netflix and things of that nature are very much going that direction with that. And then this is kind of more so for the actual like people who make films in general. I think it's just a very valuable thing to always keep up on and to have knowledge of, and it's important to know what people like to watch. And I think with today's current state of films, if we have something that's a little abstract, a little weird, something that people might not get by just watching the trailer or just get in general, more than likely the film's not going to make a lot of money because, like I said, even buying tickets to go see a movie now is about $8 to $12, and people don't want to spend that kind of money if they're really going to see something that they have really no clue about. Really, have no faith in, don't know the director, don't know some of the people involved in the acting in it and stuff. And I think we're getting to the point now where, people really want to, know what they're getting into. Um, I mean, look at this new Batman versus Superman news. I mean, we're getting it all the time, and people really want to make sure that the film that they're going to go pay to go see in 2016 is going to be very high quality, have good casting, have good writing, and it's getting to the point where I think people are very much, they really kind of, lay all their cards out on the table to make sure they watch the best possible film they can when they head out to a theater now. And I think that's one thing that directors really have to pay attention to is knowing what people like to watch. Because if they're promoting something that not a lot of people like to watch, more than likely their film's not going to make a lot of money, and they're not going to have a successful film career because of that. So, um, So yeah, those are my thoughts, guys. Where do you think the current state of film is? Do you think it's going a good direction, a bad direction? What are some things that I point out that maybe you thought yourself that I didn't point out? And like I said, let me know what you think the current state of film is, if it's good or bad, or something that you think we should get away from or do more of, or things that we're doing that we should continue doing. So let me know what you think. What is the current state of film? And curious to see your answer. And hopefully I'll see you here for the next video.